Today I'm going to talk about two of the output from the task. One is about data object assessment metrics, and the next part would mostly will be on the F-UJI. F-UJI is an automated assessment tool we developed to improve the fairness of research data. Just to inform you, this talk plus demo will take about 45 minutes. And after that, the rest 45 minutes, we will continue with the task meeting. So you can leave after the first 45 minutes. All right, so first I will give you a short introduction to the task 4.5, including its scope. And then I will describe a bit on our approach to develop the metrics and also the tools and plus demo. And I will elaborate a bit on the testing process, including the results and the pilot repository involved. And finally, the conclusion will cover plan work. Okay, so let's start with the task 4.5. I will give I'll say a few words about FastFair because I also invited external participants. FastFair is a 3-year project started March last year. The goal of the project is to develop a solution for the application of FAIR principles. Example of solutions are like practices, recommendation, policies, expertise, training, education, and practical tools. So the talk the work I'm going to present today carry out under Work Package 4. Work Package 4 has several activities addressing FAIR certification, including FAIR object assessment. The goal of the task 4.5 is to pilot the FAIR assessment of research data from trustworthy data repositories. As you know, FAIR principle are applicable to any digital object, but for this particular task, we are focusing on research data. For example, data that are collected, measured, or observed for scientific analysis. Trustworthy data repository referred to a certified data repository, for example, by CoTrustSeal, whose goal is to provide reliable and continued data access and long-term preservation to its community. What we expected in terms of the KPI of the project, the expected outcome from this task is that to have at least 100 data sets from 5 CoTrustSeal certified repository to be assessed, patched based on the metric developed. So this is something we have to deliver on month 30. In fact, to achieve this KPI, there are two important components. One is the assessment metric. The other is the practical tool to perform the assessment. Both of these two components are relevant, and they address 3 of the recommendations outlined in the Turning FAIR into Reality report produced by the European Commission Expert Group on FAIR data. Okay, so let's dive into the FAIR assessment approach. Our approach is iterative. What I mean by iterative is that first we conducted preliminary study in which we did mapping exercises of existing FAIR data assessment frameworks. And we also identify several assessment scenarios of FAIR data assessment. And as a next step, as part of the requirement analysis, we prioritize 2 use cases, as well as a common set of metrics. And these metrics then we implemented them through the tool, and then we perform 2 kinds of testing. One is the system testing, like a unit integration testing. The other is we call as a user evaluation. This is about testing the tool developed with the actual data set from the pilot repository. And then based on this process and feedback received from the repository, we use them as a basis to improve the metric or add new metric if required, and then the process repeat again. So this is what I mean by iterative development of the metrics and the tool. I will say more about now about the scenario development. So at the beginning of the project, you can also check the deliverable 4.1 for more information. What we did is we identified 8 different scenarios of FAIR data assessment. at where the assessment can be performed at the different stages of data life cycles. And also, who are the actors involved? Actors here mean refer to the FAIR stakeholder, like a data service provider, researchers, standard body, and so on. So out of the 8 scenarios, we decided to go ahead with 2 concrete use cases. One use cases is about raising awareness of researcher before they deposit their data set on FAIR aspect. The second use cases is about assessing fairness of the data set that are already published in data repository. So the tool I'm going to demo today is developed in the context to support the second use case, which is F-UJI. I will say a few words about the data assessment metric now, which is the first component we developed. We have 15, so far we have developed 15 core metrics based on existing work, notably the work from RDA Fair Data Maturity Model, as well as the prior work done by the project partners like FAIRDAS and WDS assessment of data for fitness. These metrics correspond to a part of or the whole of a principle. So this is an ongoing work. This means that in future we will have more metric added based on the testing. So the diagram you can see here is summarize the whole development of the metric. So if you can see, first we did mapping exercises and observe the differences and commonality across different assessment framework that lead to the version 1 of the metric. And then for the version 2 is a result of review of the project partner. And then for the version 3 is a result of and then we review the version 2 based on the focus group study. What is focus group study? We invited different FAIR stakeholders to provide feedback on the metric. And we also update the version 2 of the metric based on the final version of the FAIR data maturity model. So that leads to the current version of the metric, which is version 0.3. For each of the metric, if you check the metric specification, we provide the description, the example, alignment of the metric with FAIR principle, contrast requirement, as well as assessment information. For example, input and the assessment method that is required to perform assessment based on the metric. In addition to this, we also included related resources which are relevant to implement the assessment, as well as the limitation and constraint of the assessment method proposed. So we really try to be inclusive and also transparent with the method so that we can improve this in future. So as you can see, I will just show you here. If you go to the FAIR website, you can go to this menu, and then you can go to the FAIR object assessment metric. Here it provides you a short version of the metric. You can read it, but if you want to have a more detailed information about the assessment and practical tests implemented, then I would suggest you to look at the metric specifications here. Let me just make it a little bit bigger. Yeah. So you can see that here for every metric, we have a table. You can see the assessment method, related resources, known limitations and constraints. And also all this information is available online, and we welcome feedback anytime. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the tool, which is F-UJI, an automated assessment tool to perform FAIR data assessment. Before I give a demo of the tool, I want to say about the concept. What I mean by the concept, how do we go from the principle, FAIR principle, to the practical test? So the concept is based on a hierarchical concept. So for example, one FAIR principle can have one or more metric, and each metric can have one or more practical tests implemented. For example, here, this principle F1 say that metadata and data are assigned globally unique and persistent identifier. One of the metrics that correspond to this FAIR principle is that data is assigned a persistent identifier. And then how do you verify this? Then you need to implement the practical test, which is implemented in the tool. So example of practical test is that, for example, the identifier should be based on a persistent identification scheme, and the identifier should be resolved. So these are the example of practical tests implemented. For each of the metric, as you can see on the top right of the box, the small box, we follow a local identifier. It starts with FSF, refers to the FSF project, and then F1 is the second part of the identifier, referred to the principal, and the third part is referred to the local ID of the metric, and then followed by D or M. D mean it related to data, M mean it uses metadata as a target of assessment. Okay, so we use some resources to perform assessment. When I say we mean the tool actually using resources, that includes metadata embedded in the landing page. So currently there are several practices through which you can embed metadata. This is mostly used by search engines or crawlers. For example, you can include link relation type, you can include Dublin core meta tags, or you can also embed schema.org structured data. So the tool actually tried to retrieve all this metadata from the data landing page. In addition to that, we also perform content negotiation. It also uses the data file of the data set as well. So it's not just about metadata. And we also use some external FAIR enabling services. These are some of the services used by the tool, and they can be categorized into two. One is the services, first type is the services that provide repository information. For example, if your data set is minted through PIT provider like a DataSite, from this information, there is a link to the retrieve data record, and then the tool automatically retrieve the endpoint used by the repository. And this is used as a basis to perform the assessment. The other type, which I call as a lookup services, this is to verify the values specified in the metadata. For example, if you from the OAI PMH, we can know what are the metadata implemented by the repository, and then we can actually query the RDA metadata standard catalog to verify if this is a community preferred metadata standard or not. The other example is if your metadata has a license specified, then you can also use the SPDX license registry to check if this is a standard license or not. So these are the two types of external services currently being used by the tool. And this is the most simplified flow on the data gathering part. So in order to run the tool, you need to have an identifier. This can be a PIT, or it can be also a URL. And then what happened is that first the tool use the identifier to extract the metadata from the data landing page, and it also performs content negotiation to get additional metadata. If it is a PIT identifier, for example, retrieved through DataSite PIT provider, it also doing another request to the DataSite registry to get additional metadata. All these metadata are then combined and then used as a basis to perform the assessment. The other workflow is about gathering information about the repository. And there are also, as part of the request, the user also can supply harvesting endpoint, for example, OEM PMH endpoint. And if this is supplied, it also extract information from about the repository from the OEI PMH, in this case, the standard implemented Otherwise, if there is no OMI PMH performed, it also tried to see if it is an identifier from the data side, and then it tried to also hit the retrieve data and then get the information from that. So this is the most simplified flows through which the tool actually gathering information necessary to perform the assessment. I will right away go to the demo. I will use the data set from my colleagues, who are Robert Huber, who is also co-developer of the tool. So this is the data set, as you can see. This data set is about paleoceanographic data sets, and I'm going to test it using the F-UJI. F-UJI is a web service. This is because the web service is developed based on open API specifications, so you can use also Swagger to test it, or you can also write your own script to actually test with the service. Currently, we are hosting it under Pangaya, which is also available outside. You can, so I will just put the username and then password. And then you can try, like I said, the OAI PMH is optional. So in this case, we don't really need it because Pangia using DataSite as a PIT provider. And then here now I will copy paste Robert data. And then if you want to have a more detailed trail of assessment step, then you can set the test debug to true, and then you execute. Okay, so can you see the screen, or is it too small? I will try to make it, okay, yeah. Okay, as you can see here, the tool also give you the metric specifications, which is about which metric version we are using.
Anu,
Yeah?
can you zoom a little bit more, maybe?
How about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, all right. So the results is for every result, we have a metric identifier, the metric name, the output of the assessment, the score, as well as the test debug, the trail of the assessment performed. As you can see here, for example, this is a metric about metadata include descriptive core elements, and then these are the output of the assessment, Robert Huber, the keyword, and then it has a scoring. It also have a status, for example, if all metadata is provided, partial metadata or insufficient metadata. It also tell you the source of the information, how the metadata is retrieved, and also the trail of the assessment. So how all the steps performed to do the assessment here. And this is repeated for all the metric. And so far we have implemented 14 out of the 15 metrics specified in the specification. Okay, I will now, oh, sorry, there's another one. We also have another operation, which is called here metric. With this metric, you can get all the definition of the metric and also the assessment step. So this is just give you all the information about metric implemented, the version and the, for example, the descriptions and so on. So there's two operations supported by the service. One is to evaluate, the other is to get description of all the metric implemented. Okay, so I will continue with the talk. All right, so like I said, this is a web service, and which for the request, you just need to have an identifier, and the result will be returned in a JSON format. And in terms of the results, it contains, for each of the results, we have the identifier, the output, the scoring, and also the text, the debug messages on the assessment. And okay, so now I will say something about the testing the tool with the pilot repositories. So our approach is not purely automated assessment. It's a combination of automated assessment plus consultancy with the pilot repository. What I mean by is that first we actually discuss with the pilot repository to gather information about the repository context. And then we use this information to run the assessment. And then based on the assessment result, we develop a recommendation for fair data improvement. And then we discuss this recommendation with the pilot repository, and then they improve their metadata, data, or services based on the recommendation provided. At the same time, while testing the actual data, if there is a bugs or there's a few further features should be included, we also use this as an opportunity to improve the tool. Just to show you more information, for example, I will use one of the pilot repositories, which is the last one, is we tested, let's say, Database NO. So as a first step, like I say, as part of the consultancy approach, we get context information about the repository, like for example, their domain, community, observation target, API, and so on. And after that, we perform the assessment, and then we come up with the recommendation for fair data improvement for each of the metrics. As you can see here, this is like a short recommendation saying for every metric and what is missing and what they should do next and the action. So it's really a combination of automated assessment and consultancy with the repositories. And the result is that so these are the 5 repositories currently collaborating with the project. Except for Pangea, I must acknowledge that all these 4 repositories are working together with our team in a voluntary basis. They are not project partners. So I really want to thank them for their collaboration. And as you can see, all of them are COTRA-SEAL certified, and they address different subject areas. So far, as of last week, we have evaluated 500 data sets from each of these 5 repositories. In fact, we have completed the first improvement based on the recommendation provided for Pangea, and the rest repository now improving their data, metadata, and services based on the recommendation we provided. So this is an example of the results before and after. So you can see the chart, the x-axis represents the score, the FAIR score, the y-axis represents the number of data sets for each principles. As you can see that before we, on the first, during the first assessment, the accessibility and reusability are not so good. So we provided a recommendation to improve them, and then the repository improve their metadata, and then we run the second assessment. As you can see, the score really improved during the second assessment. So this is what we want to repeat for the rest 4 repository. So our goal is actually to move all the bar on the chart to the right. This is what we are aiming at the present. And I want to share some.
Sorry, may I ask? Why is in the first definability 2 bars there?
And because this is go back to, because the data set are randomly selected, so which means that you have some old data sets and also new data sets. So which means that as you can see, the differences is because some old data set don't have all the necessary information required for findability.
Good.
Barbara, is it answer my question?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, so I want to share some important point based on our experience working with actual repository. First is about identifying the object to be assessed. As you can see here, the repository A have an experiment, it has data group, and then data group have many data sets. And then you have a repository B, have a collections, which have several data series. And then we have a repository C, which have a collection, and then each collection have a data set, and each data set may have one or more files. The common observation here that they are hierarchically structured, but the question is how we can identify which object at which level to be assessed. Because if you can see the data repository C, the collection is not same as the collection in data repository B. In the data repository C, the collection is actually data catalog, whereas in the data repository B, the collection is actually referred to the publication series. So in terms of the automated assessment, there is no way to really identify automatically the ideal data set to be assessed. And the way we did is that we consulted at the beginning of the assessment with the pilot repository to identify the target of the observation, which object at which level we want to assess, because this is really related to what the repository want to improve. The second aspect is performance, very important, especially if we want to put software application in practice, but this is hardly being discussed so far in terms of fair assessment implementation. So we have taken certain measures. For example, as you know, the tool is using external resources to support the assessment. So some of the selected information from these resources are now temporarily stored, cached, as part of the tool. The other step we took is also that based on our experience testing with the data set, for example, Dataverse NO, we discovered that the way they are structured data, so they have data set which have more than like 500,000 files. Processing all these files will take a long time. So we took a pragmatic approach. Now through the tool configuration file, now you can also set maximum number of data file to be assessed for each of the data sets specified with the identifier. So this is really a pragmatic approach which we implemented in terms of to improve the performance of the tool. The other thing is about restricted data, and fair data is not just about open data. Restricted data also can be fair. So at present, all the assessment we perform is using only open data. But if you test the service with the restricted data, what it does is that it will give you some information saying that the identifier is not accessible with the HTTP error code. And because the data file also used by other metric, it also say that it cannot perform. For example, in the case of data file format check, it also say that it was not able to perform the check because the resource is unavailable or inaccessible. So this is how currently we are handling restricted data. But I think one of the big question around or the automated assessment remain is that how can we perform automated assessment of restricted data programmatically in a standard way, because every repository have different authentication mechanism. So there's a still open question how machine can discover this and perform the assessment of restricted data. We don't have an answer to this, but if you are working in this topic, please let us know. We want to further explore in this direction. So the tool is retrieving metadata and data in a several way. So it using metadata. So the check mark are currently some of the way have been implemented. Without the check marks, this is something also currently we are working on to support also other way of retrieving the metadata. Okay, conclusion. So our approach is use case driven, iterative, and reuse and adapt. What I mean by use case driven is that we are really focusing on specific use case, which is about assessing data set that are already been published in data repository. Iterative, as I said, that the automated assessment combined with the consultancy, with the pilot repositories, and we reuse, yeah?
I know we lost you for a couple of seconds. I don't think it's really important, but if you can repeat the last sentence.
Okay, our approach is use case driven, iterative, reuse, and adapt. Use case driven refer to, because we're really looking at the data set that are assessing data set that are already published. So it's it's specific to this use case. Iterative mean that we are working together with the actual repository to improve the metric and also the implementation of the tool. Reuse and adapt. As you can see, we reuse existing work. For example, the metric, we don't reinvent the wheel. We build on existing work as well as the tool, also reusing external services that are already available out there. And continuous improvement is very important. Therefore, we need more pilot repository. And if you want to participate in the testing process, please let us know. We are happy to work with you. And what's next is first to implement the badging of the assessment results. And we are currently also working together with other FAIR project or institution also, like EOS Synergy, EOS Nordic, Database, and AlgoFair, and so on. So we want to continue working together with other initiative with regard to the object assessment. Something about the measuring fair data. So our metric currently at the general level, so it's really core metrics. And one thing we should remember is that FAIR principles are not new to data repository. Some of the principles have been already implemented by the repository before even the term is coined. So which means that when we perform the assessment, we should keep the repository in the loop. By keeping the repository in the loop, we'll get familiar with the context of the repository, which is important to perform the automated assessment. And the automated assessment save effort, but in order this aspect to work, all the components of the research data ecosystem have to be machine friendly. However, this is not the case, but this shouldn't be an excuse for not making a progress. I see this more like an opportunity for further improving these enabling services. And what I presented today is just about fair assessment object. What equally important is the fair enabling repository and services. So I really see here Kotra still playing an important role, because the fair assessment tool and metric can be used to assess if a certified repository guarantees the provision of fair data set, whereas the quadracy requirement is essential to long-term preservation of those data sets. I also want to, here you can see all the colleagues from task 4.5. So if you have any question about the scenarios, use cases, tools, and metric, please feel free to contact us. Some of them, in fact, like Patricia, Mustafa, also Joy, and Hervé, also involved in other work packages. So please, if you want to have more information, please feel free to contact us. I have also included all the related link regarding the tool as well as the metric here. And I want to take this opportunity also to promote another tool developed by Task 4.5. This tool in support of the first use case, which is about raising awareness of the users here being researcher in making their data fair. Okay, I will see. I have some, I want to do some quiz for you before you ask me questions. Can you go to the, let me just start it.
Can you display the code for the Menti again, Anu?
Yeah, can you see now?
Yes, thanks.
How many people we have in the call?
We have 30 people,
Oh,
31,
okay.
including
Then
you.
I will wait more.
Sorry, I have a problem. It says get ready to play, but I can't. So there's nothing happening.
Yes,
now.
because Anu is waiting.
For
Ah.
30 people to join. Do we really have a 30 people?
31, Anu.
We do.
I'm just checking the time. Oh, we have plenty of time. Okay.
Maybe you can start already, Anu, and people can join.
I will start now.
Dying here.
Okay, the first question. Please choose the total number of fair data assessment metric developed by FairSfair. Okay, so so the correct answer is 15. As you can see here, we have developed. I will just go to the FairSfair website. So if you go to the FairSfair website, you go to the menu. It takes time to load to the object assessment metrics. So currently we have developed 15 metrics. So the answer is 15. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Which of the following aspects are documented in the FairSfair data object metric specification? So I'm referring to the latest version.
We can choose multiple choices here, huh?
Yeah.
Is it a trick question, Anu?
It was on purpose. Okay, I have 23. Maybe one more, I will wait. Okay, so the correct answers are metric description. All of them except the persistent identifier of metric. The reason is that this identifier FSF F101D, this is a local identifier. So we haven't minted any PID for this identifier. So these are local identifier of the metric, not persistent identifier. Okay, let's go to the next one. How many metrics have been so far implemented in F-UJI?
We are not really supposed to know this. Or
Just put one number, Barbara. This is not like, there's no ranking of the board, so.
You mean there will be no winner at the end of the quiz?
No, come on, I'm going for the spirit of the session, not so much on the scoring, so.
I feel to be in the school.
Okay, so the right answer is 14.
Oh.
And
Wow.
yes, but don't worry, there is a reason why I put this question. All these metrics are implemented except one metric, which is about metadata remain available, even the data is no longer available. So technically, if you want to test this metric, the data set has to be replaced or remove, then only you can test it. So so currently this is the discussion going on in the group, how we can test it, because this is only applicable to the data set that are already removed or replaced. Then only you can check if the metadata is still available. There's also proposal in the RDA GitHub that we should look at the data, the preservation plan. But again, when you talk about preservation plan, you don't have a plan for each individual data set. You have preservation plan, at least if you follow the COTRA seal requirement, I think it's R10, you are doing at the repository level. So this is really something I think we need to rethink about. If we really want to implement this assessment, we should consider this at the repository level assessment, not really at the object level assessment.
Yeah, and the plan must be machine readable, which is most often not the case.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. F-UJI only uses metadata of a data set to assess the data set's fairness. Yes or no? There is still one person cannot decide. Okay, I will just show you the correct answer. Oh, we have 25 people now. Okay, so the answer is no. And F-UJI uses the metadata of the data set. It also uses the data file of the data set to perform the assessment. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, I want to test F-UJI. When I say I mean assuming you are a data repositories or researcher. How do I get started? So you can select multiple options here. Okay, so the answer is all. So you can go to the GitHub. I will just quickly show you here. You can go to the GitHub repositories, download the source code and install it. We also provided step to do it. In fact, two of the project, EOS Nordic and for Andreas, and also Wilco from EOS Synergy have tested it. Now they are running an instances of this tool in their machine. The second thing, you can also email the developer, myself, as well as Robert Huber. There is also contact information here. We will also help you to install in your computer and remotely, of course. And you can also request the credential to access the test service from us. As I said before, as part of my demo, we are now also running the test service in Pangea server. Okay, now, last question. Based on today's presentation, please summarize the automated assessment tool F-UJI in 2 words. Oh, I like this, F-UJI rocks. Ice cube, that's interesting. I didn't see any more new words. And so at least I can see it's useful. So this is a very positive encouragement for us. So as I say, this is a work in progress. I will really encourage, if you are interested testing F-UJI, please let us know, or if you are data repositories, if you want to participate in the testing process, also please let us know, because now we are also supporting other repositories beside the 5 pilot repository collaborating with the project. All right, so that's all for today. And I think we have about 10 minutes for the question and answers. I'll take it from here.
Hi, Anu. This is Kostas.
Hi, Kostas.
Just a question, because there was a similar presentation I attended from EOSC Synergy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, so in that presentation, there was a bit of uncertainty whether a tool can sort of, be okay to accommodate different types of repositories, sort of built in, meaning the tool from EOSC Synergy, they base it on DSpace. I see in the chat that EOSC Nordic is based on Dataverse. So do you think that there could be indeed some sort of common meeting to see what are the tricky parts in the implementation to address, how repositories deal with the metadata? I mean, of course, it's technical issues, but
Okay.
can this be something that a sort of universal tool, or is it something where you have to know in advance where the data are stored? So if I just have a PID, it will not be easy for me to, let's say, select the tool, or do I have to know in advance that, okay, for this repository, it's better if you use that tool? And related question, the EOSC Synergy folks were perhaps, exploring the idea of, could we have multiple tools for assessment built in a pipeline, and the user can choose and pick?
So I will give you a more broader answer before I dive into the technical aspect of it. First of all, if you want to develop a tool for this particular use case, human in the loop is important. When I say human in the loop, mean the repositories. You need to get familiar with the practices, common practices. I'm not really talking about like domain specific. There are common practices already being followed by this repository, and mostly are based on web standards. For example, embedding the metadata schema.org and OAI PMH protocol. So these are like already being implemented by repository independent of the domain discipline area. So if you want to do performance for the repository, then you need to ensure that the practical tests are compliant with the web standards or other like well-known standards. So this is the first step. The second step, which you're asking about, having a different tool for different, I think it's a bit difficult, because from my experience, I can see that the large differences is in terms of how the practical tests are implemented. So you have certain metric, and then you have practical tests. Maybe a Mark tool use different tests than F-UJI is implementing. But the thing is, who will actually recognize and accept these tests as a way of assessing, right? Then we need to have more like a funder or publisher roles here to actually recognize that, okay, these are the assessments that are performed based on the metric, and how this is implemented. That has to be clearly communicated. But like if you say you want to have a different tool for different repository, I don't know what is the advantage there, but if you have tools that can improve the repository, then me as a data provider, I will go with that tool. So the data provider always think about the benefits. If I want to use the tool, then I should get something back. So if the tool can help me to improve, then I will go with the tool. So Yeah, I know it's a very difficult
Right, thanks.
question
Yeah,
because
sure.
there's a lot of parallel development going on.
There is,
Like,
but I guess maybe there is value in sort of maybe even fair is fair coordinating with the two regional projects and seeing what the progress is.
yeah,
I see now from the Philip replied in the chat that I didn't get the bit about Dataverse right, but nevertheless, in the EOSC Synergy presentation, there was discussion about could the tool that was developed based on this space handle data in Dataverse equally and not sort of miss perhaps reading correctly a file because of a different implementation in the repositories.
yeah, that's why I think the practical tests have to be clearly communicated and documented. Without we are knowing how the practical tests associated with the metric implemented, then we cannot do this comparison between different tools, right? So in the case of FASFAR, I can say that because our specification clearly indicate what are the practical tests implemented to perform the assessment. I see the role of GoFair here as well. If they want to bring together different developer of this tool to conduct a study on to observe the commonality or comparison between the tool and the practical test, this is another way to go as well. So I don't know, Mustafa, as a PCO also in the call, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, well, some few additional comments. I think all of this area is in its infancy, and I think it's quite natural to see multiple tools being tested and being developed. I think a key comment here is there is a need to have discussions across these multiple developed tools and the teams developing these tools. What I see also quite important in the approach you've presented, Anu, is this consultancy aspect with the repositories. The testing is not to judge the repository, but it's to improve the repository.
Yeah.
And when you take this consultancy approach, I think it helps find this middle road between the assessment and the improvement of the repository. The tools are not here because they're not finalized yet. They're not. They're in this still progress, continuous progress approach you presented quite well. So I think helping the repositories, which in some cases are already fair, or sorry, not fair, but enabling fair, I should avoid using fair, they are fair. So they enable fair, but the tools, for example, cannot really, because they're not using, as you presented, schema.org or whatever, they cannot access the data needed, the information needed for the assessment. So only implementing some of those standards can enable the tools to assess correctly those repositories. So it's both sides are adapting. So the tools are being developed and the repositories are adapting some of their practices by endorsing those standards you've presented.
Yeah, that's well said. Also, as part of the recommendations we develop for each of the repository, we clearly give them several options. For example, metric about expressing the access level of metadata. There are several ways to do it, and we give them option, and then we work together to the repository to find the best way, which way to implement, because you also need to understand this repository already have technology or certain system they are already running for years, so they won't really change it. So you need to also think a little bit in a creative way how you can make a new improvement building on existing technology that already been deployed by the repository. I think this is important. So I will highly encourage this approach of assessment plus consultancy moving forward.
Anu, I have a question. Are you aware of FAIR implementation profiles developed by GoFair?
No.
Do you know about this? These profiles gather FAIR enabling resources used by a community, and we are thinking of as a next step, let's such a tool as you developed run through these resources to assess the fairness level of it or score.
I wasn't aware about fair data profile, I must admit, but
Fair
my last
Can I answer?
but yeah.
Here's Robert. So these implementation profiles are about community-specific fair implementations, right? So F-UJI is it's a generic testing tool. So it's testing generic cross-community fair indicators instead of specific ones.
That's fine. Yeah.
But it can be adopted to community needs, for example, when it comes to test individual metadata formats or stuff.
Yeah, it's not only metadata. It's we are addressing each of the FAIR principles. So it's about identifying.
Yeah.
Yes, but
there
are a lot of community-specific implementations which are not necessarily fair in terms of cross-community fairness, and this is what F-UJI is addressing.
Barbara, if I get it right, you are just done the study, but you haven't developed the tool yet.
I have developed a tool.
You have
next week we have starting 8 different workshops with communities from different, from life sciences to social sciences to environmental sciences, testing this.
Okay.
But we have not included there any fairness assessment level, or we are gathering the implementation choices of these communities. So
okay.
Next year we would like to add there, so to combine tools, and it'd be interesting to talk with you.
Yeah.
And see how we could do that.
Yeah, so I just also want to tell you, Barbara, F-UJI is an open source. You feel free to adapt, apply, adopt. All the source code are available in the GitHub. So it would be great if you also can consider adopting F-UJI, for example, or adapting F-UJI to suit your needs. And if you need also credential for the test service, if you want to get a feel of the tool also, please let us know. I can also provide you the credential so that you can have the first feeling of using the tool. I think it's a bit difficult because there's a lot of things going on the FAIR and FAIR tool. Without me looking deep into the tool, it's difficult for me to say something. I would definitely, but it would be great if you can also share the link about your work.
Yeah, we will present it next week and also record first session or the first presentation and application of it. So I can then better share this information. There is a paper also.
Yeah.
But later on then.
Yeah, I have to end the call now because I got a message from Mustafa. Now it's over 45 minutes. So I want to thank everybody. Like I said, this is an ongoing development. So if you are interested in testing the tool, please get in touch with us. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, Anu.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Anu, will we just stay here in the call?
Yeah, we will stay in this call.